أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصل اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين المظلومين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا ولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة بن الحسن العسكري، فداه أرواح العالمين. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. For the hastening of the reappearance and return of the Master, the Savior, the Avenger, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, a second louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. As a gift and an offering to the second Imam, Al-Hasan al-Mushtaba, alayhi salatu wassalam, a third louder salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. My dear brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Amir al-Mu'mineen has a statement which Al-Sharif al-Radhi, the compiler of Nahj al-Balagha, has included in the maxims section of this book. The Imam, 14 centuries ago, told us something that is a key ingredient to success in this life. The Imam said, and I quote, "As-sa'iru al-'amilu bighayri 'ilm," according to some versions of the hadith, bighayri basira. "Al-'amilu bighayri 'ilmin kas-sa'iri 'ala ghayri at-tariq." لا تزيده كثرة المسير إلا بعده. He says that the one who acts and works and strives and puts in the effort without knowledge, without expertise, is like a person who is going on the wrong path, on the wrong road. The farther he gets, the farther he is from his intended destination. Think about this for a second. You're trying to get from, let's say, London to Birmingham. But for some reason, you make a mistake, or you don't ask for directions, or it's too dark and you don't have a navigation device. For whatever reason, you take the road to Brighton. What's going to happen? The more you advance on that road, the more you drive, the farther away you're getting from your original destination, which was Birmingham. You're driving in the wrong direction. The road might be okay. You might be driving an expensive, well fit out car. You yourself are healthy and alert. The problem is you're on the wrong road. The issue here isn't the lack of tools, perhaps, or awareness. The issue is, as long as you're on the wrong road, not only do you not reach your destination, but you're getting farther and farther away from it. Amir al-Mu'mineen uses this example to illustrate the importance of possessing knowledge, of being aware and deliberate and intentional in your actions. The reason I started with this quote from Amir al-Mu'mineen is that when it comes to certain areas in our lives, we are deliberate and intentional. For instance, when it comes to our studies, when it comes to our careers, when it comes to our health sometimes, although not everyone, they ensure that the things they eat, for instance, are healthy. At the very least, if they're not healthy and nutritious, they're not detrimental to their health, that they're not harmful, right? But there are areas in our lives which are of prime importance that we do not possess the knowledge, even though we take steps in those areas. One of those is raising good children. It is customary on such a night to speak about marriage and to speak about child rearing. And so I want to draw your attention to this critical subject. Why is it critical? Because it has to do with producing the next generation of people that adhere to this school. It's about bringing children into this world who carry our legacy and our name. It's because our reputation rests on our children. Imam al-Sajjad says in the Treatise of Rights, he says that you should know, wa'lam, that your child is an extension of you. Your child is a reflection of who you are. The fact that we suffer from so many ailments in society today is because the previous generation, with all due respect to them, and they worked a great deal, they exerted much effort, they produced institutions that allowed us to prosper. There's no doubt, no one's denying their contributions. But the problem is that many of the actions they took when they were getting ready to marry, when they had their kids, their actions were not deliberate. They weren't intentional. They also lacked knowledge, just as we do today. And that's why you see problems being perpetuated. And the issues that our parents suffered from, we also suffer from. but they're compounded by new and emerging challenges. So things are only getting worse. And the next generation will have to suffer from the same problems compounded by the challenges of their day. Things that we can't even begin to imagine. Just like our parents couldn't imagine the issues that we're going through. The reason for that is because the things that we do in this specific area are not grounded in knowledge. They're not grounded in the right set of questions. How do I become a good parent? How can I become a good father or mother? No one seems to be asking these questions. Amir al-Mu'mineen, once again, he says the following. He says, حُسْنُ السُّؤَالِ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ. Asking the right question shows that you're already on your right path. It shows that you have a good grounding in knowledge that now allows you to ask the right questions and therefore receive answers to those questions. Remember, Amir al-Mu'mineen is famous for saying, "Saluni qabla an tafqiduni." Ask me. فَإِنِّي أَعْلَمْ بِطُرُقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ مِنِّي بِطُرُقِ الْأَرْضِ. Ask me before you lose me, for I am more aware and have more knowledge of the pathways in heaven than of the pathways on earth. In other words, you want to seek nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You want to overcome your spiritual challenges? Ask me, come to me. So now we have two types of people who ask the Imam questions. You have the idiot who gets up and says to him, how many strands of hair do I have on my head? Which, even if you had the answer to this question, which of your problems would it solve? How is this question conducive to your spiritual development? How will it help you be a better human being? So even when it comes to asking questions, be intentional and deliberate. Figure out what's important and what's not important. What's a priority and what's not a priority. What addresses your inherent problems and what does nothing to further your understanding. Of course, that man was a hypocrite. He was trying to challenge the Imam and make him look bad because he thought the Imam wouldn't be able to answer his question. That's one example. The other example is Kumayl ibn Ziyad. He comes to the Imam. He says to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, mal haqiqa? What's the truth? Share with me the things that help me be a better human being. Someone who fulfills the purpose of life, which is what? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Teach me how to be a slave of Allah. Teach me how to be moral and how to act in a manner that pleases my Creator. You see the difference between the two? So asking the right set of questions, specifically in this area. How can I fulfill my role in motherhood or fatherhood? How do I create a family that allows children to prosper and grow and blossom into people who await the return of the 12th Imam, the Savior? Are we even asking these questions? Or do we take life in the haphazard way that we treat entertainment, for instance? Marriage, brothers and sisters, is a deeply flawed concept in this day and age. It is highly romanticized. Marriage is about the wedding dress. Marriage is about the diamond ring. Marriage is about the honeymoon that you're going to take to some fancy destination in some Greek island somewhere where I can snap pictures and selfies and post them on social media and make other people make the wrong assumptions about marriage. You know how when they say that some people are not marriage material? Most people are not marriage material because their conception and their understanding, the image of marriage in their head is so flawed and romanticized. We put in all the effort, all the time to prepare for the wedding because marriage is about the wedding. It's about the celebration. It's about the joy and the happiness. And of course, there's joy and happiness in it. But marriage, brothers and sisters, is like an investment. It's like a new business venture. When you start a new business, is there cause for celebration? Sure. You've hit a new milestone. You've advanced to a degree where you're now ready to launch a new initiative and maybe make some money along the way. So there is cause for celebration, meaning being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But is that what it's about? Of course not. A new business venture is about hard work. It's about investing your time and effort to making sure that this venture succeeds. Whereas marriage in the eyes of most young people today is not about an investment. It's not about putting hard work and effort. It's not about patience and perseverance. The last thing they want to think of is patience. That word is not associated with marriage. Marriage to them is this romantic thing where people love each other, the two lovebirds, and they think that's how it's going to be all the time. When in fact, we know that it's not. That's why half of all marriages end up in divorce. Why do you think that is? This is despite the fact that they have gotten to know each other inside and out. They spend so much time. If they don't adhere to our values, they date for years and years and years before they pop the question. If they are members of our community, they have to be engaged for a lengthy period of time where they pretend to be someone that they're not, where they make promises that they can't keep, which is why the statistics are pretty universal. Half of all marriages end up in divorce. This applies to our community as well. I don't have any specific statistics, but I imagine, at least given what we see and what we hear, so many marriages fail because, once again, those lengthy engagement periods do not further the idea of fostering a strong relationship. What they do is they simply make the two individuals into professional hypocrites. People who act in each other's presence in one way, which goes against their actual and real habits, which is why this is incorrect. Lengthy engagement periods are wrong. I'm not saying that you shouldn't conduct your own due diligence. I'm not saying that you shouldn't carry out a KYC, as they call it, know your client. I'm not saying that you shouldn't discover the true nature of that person. You just won't be able to do this using those lengthy engagement periods. If someone, a bank manager, wanted to give a client a loan, a KYC in their case, doesn't mean that they should date this client. It means they should get to know them, which means you ask about them, you ask for references, you look at their finances. That's what you do. In other words, you conduct a background check without directly getting to know the individual. Because a background check is often much more effective in revealing the true nature of that person than simply getting to know them as friends or as in a fiancé relationship during the engagement. So of course you have to ask around. Of course you have to do a background check. Of course you have to ask for references. And I've talked extensively about this in a series that I did last year called Family Ethics. Look it up. My point is that we try to go about this process in the wrong way. Once again, I want to go to Birmingham, but I'm driving to Brighton. Because I don't have the basira, I don't have the insight, and I don't have the knowledge as to how this should be done. Brothers and sisters, the reality is this. Whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you're aware of it or not, the reality is we're sitting in a neighborhood where the houses around us are on fire. We are bombarded with all kinds of erroneous ideas, false beliefs, and values. We need to wake up. There's a fire that's coming to my house. The fire might already be inside my house. And we're all like, no, it's okay. My son's a good boy. My daughter is a good girl. when in fact we don't know what's going on. We can smell the wood burning, but we're still completely ambivalent. We're distracted in our own little bubbles. The first thing we must do, if we're going to raise good children, and I'm specifically addressing people who are not married, because this is the time to begin your work. Why? Because you have to choose carefully. You need to do this way in advance. You're about to travel to a new country you've never been to. You're going there on vacation. What do? You conduct research, extensive research. You read blog posts, you watch videos, you ask around people who have already been there, you find out where to go, the top tourist attractions, the best means to getting there, the best flights, tickets, so on and so forth. You do all of this work before you travel. If I begin my research after I've landed, I'm on the clock. The clock's ticking. I'm losing time, effort, money. Now's not the time for me to start researching the best places to go. And so, if we are going to raise the next generation and address the endemic problems that we're suffering from in this day and age, we have to start early. Remember the hadith that I cited a couple of nights ago when I said Amir al-Mu'mineen? I quoted the Imam as saying, بادروا أحداثكم قبل أن يسبقكم إليهم المرجئة. The Imam says, Badir. Badir, the best translation I can find in English is to take the initiative. Right? But mubadara is like happiness. It's not something you could just translate. Well, what is happiness? You need an hour-long lecture to explain what happiness is. Right? Mubadara is the same. What is mubadara? The best, most concise definition is this: that you take precautionary steps to ensure that an impending or imminent danger doesn't affect you. The Imam is not saying راقبوا أبناءكم or أحداثكم, as he says. You should monitor your youth so that they don't deviate. He's not saying that. You could put a security camera at home in your son's or daughter's bedroom, for instance, to continuously monitor them. The Imam is not saying this. He says if you get to the point where you have to install a security camera to ensure that your child is not veering off, it's too late. Instead, the Imam says, Badiru, take the initiative. In other words, take steps that ensure they will never have to suffer from this problem before they fall into the laps of deviant groups. The number of messages I get on a daily basis, and the people who come up to me on a constant basis, every single time I finish the lecture, walk out, I see a parent, usually a mother, sometimes a father, and immediately they begin to cry. What would I do? What should I do? My son, my daughter, he doesn't want to come to the majlis. He doesn't pray anymore. He's this, he's that. And I'd hate to say it, but were you a good enough father for him? Were you the right kind of mother for her? The fact that you're asking me about this now means that they've probably missed the boat. I'm sorry to say this. Had you applied the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen when he said, Badiru ahdathakum, you wouldn't be in this position. You would take precautionary measures, and the first thing you would do is to learn the tools, the techniques. And this is a nuanced subject, and it's extensive. Because the way you would ensure that your son doesn't deviate differs from the way you would ensure your daughter doesn't deviate. The way you would ensure that your teenage son or daughter doesn't deviate differs from when they're younger than that. You don't treat someone who's 14 years old the way you would treat them when they're 7 years old. The way you would address this problem in this country differs from the way you would address it in a Muslim country. So you see how there are so many different variables, so many different scenarios. By saying all of this, I know some of you are thinking, oh my God, this is more complicated than I thought. And you're probably becoming afraid, and that's good. I want you to be afraid. We have two kinds of fear. One that cripples you, that makes you unable to move or take action. That's not the good kind of fear. The other kind is the one that says, hey, there's a danger out there. I need to make sure I have the right tools, I have the right skills, I have the right know-how to ensure that this danger doesn't reach me. In other words, being anxious and being stressed out about parenthood is a good thing. The problem is, a lot of people are not. Again, it's very haphazard. It's unintentional. It's like whatever happens, happens. Or as many parents, unfortunately, have in recent years fallen into this trap, where they simply outsource the upbringing of their children to the local Saturday school. The head of one of the Islamic schools said to me, he said, Sayyid, the problem we have is most parents, they delegate the upbringing and discipline of their children to us. They come and drop off their kids and they think that we have to raise their kids for them. That's why we've set up classes for parents. Brother, sister, come, let's teach you how to be good parents. You didn't have to get married, but now that you're married, you have responsibilities. You didn't have to bring children into this world, but now that you have responsibilities. You need to know how to deal with them. You need to know how to raise them. But then when everything goes haywire, the fire engulfs the entire house, that's when they're like, who do we go to? Who do we turn to? Is there a counselor? Is there a psychologist? Is there a therapist? Is there a scholar who can help us? But it's too late then. I've mentioned this before. Mirza Jawad Aghai Tehrani, rahmatullah ta'ala alayhi, a grand scholar in the holy city of Mashhad, has very good children. He raised pious, God-fearing scholars of his own. So they said to him once, what's your secret? He said, my secret? I've been praying and begging and groveling, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give me good children before I got married. The choice of my spouse was intentional so that she would then bring me good children into this world. And now, what are the criteria people have when it comes to choosing a spouse? The Holy Prophet says, subhanallah, what a hadith that shakes us to the core. The Prophet says, "Man tazawwaja imra'atan limaliha," whoever marries a woman for her wealth or status, the name of the tribe, the name of the family, the father, the uncle, he's this, that. "Man tazawwaja imra'atan limaliha wakalahu Allahu ilayh." Allah says, you know what? You go and let that money help you. Allah abandons you and says, let's see how that money will benefit you. وَمَنْ تَزَوَّجَ امْرَأَةً لِجَمَالِهَا, and whoever marries a woman for her beauty, رَأَى فِيهَا مَا يَكْرَهُ, he will see something in her that is grotesque, repulsive. Because you only see one part, you don't see everything. The same applies to men. You don't see everything. Oh, he's got the biceps and the chiseled chin and he's got the looks and what have you. He works out. But that's not all he is. رَأَى فِيهَا مَا يَكْرَهُ وَمَنْ تَزَوَّجَ امْرَأَةً لِدِينِهَا, but whoever marries a woman where the only criteria, and if not the only criteria, the number one criteria is her religiosity and faith, devotion, piety, رَزَقَهُ اللَّهُ مَالَهَا وَجَمَالَهَا. Allah will then bring, it's a package deal. He will get both her beauty and her wealth. Because he prioritized religion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look after him. Beauty meaning not that she will subtly turn into a supermodel, but he will love her. Whatever she looks like, he will love her. I've seen people like this. They're so madly in love with their wife, it's incredible. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself will inject love between them, regardless of what they look like. Our criteria are all over the place. Our priorities are all over the place. Why do you think this cycle, this vicious cycle, is being repeated over and over again? Because من عمل بغير علم أو العامل بغير علم كالسائر على غير طريق. We're going in the wrong direction. So, when it comes to bringing good, pious, moral children into this world, you begin with the choice of spouse. You begin with who you choose as the parent of your children. And ensure that religiosity and faith and devotion and piety, these are the markers that make you choose them. It's easier said than done. There aren't any good men out there, is what I hear from the sisters. There aren't any good women out there, is what I hear from the brothers. I know this is an issue. We live in a society where you don't quite know somebody until you actually marry them. It's difficult, yes. But just like any other initiative, any other business venture, any other strategic project that you're getting into, you have to put in the effort. You have to work hard. And you have to pray. You have to supplicate. You have to beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show you the way. And again, I've talked extensively about this in the series that I cited. You begin there. Then you need to understand what marriage really is. As I said, that romanticized fairy tale depiction of marriage needs to be thrown out the window. You're a human being, so is she. We're not robots, we're not perfect. I'm not Ali ibn Abi Talib, nor are you Fatima Zahra. There is going to be problems, there's going to be tensions, there are going to be ups and downs. Yes, there are those, if we were to categorize marriages into three parts, we'd say that you have a small sliver of the community, a small sliver of married couples whose marriages are near perfect. They're as good as they get. Then you have at the bottom of the scale marriages which are a living hell. There's no peace of mind. There is no respect. There is absolutely no trace of religion. And you have a sizable number of people fall into that category. Then you have the majority of people in the middle. And they're like, we have our smiles and we have our tears. We have our ups and we have our downs. We have our moments. Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we fight, sometimes we don't. Most people fall into that category. If that's the case, that's good. Because it means there is room for improvement. It means that you can actually fix some of the problems that you have if you follow the guidelines set by our religion. Right? And so, that romanticized depiction, throw it out. Recognize that as a wife, your husband will have days and times and moments where he is not going to be the ideal husband. What do you do there? When the Prophet says, Jihadul mar'ati husnul taba'ul. What the Prophet is saying is that as a woman, you should be able to manage conflict. You should be able to manage the affairs of a household and keep it together. Oftentimes, it's the wife that can do this. She has the capability. She has the power. She has the language skills to ensure that a household doesn't fall apart because the guy is having a bad day or because he's grumpy or angry for whatever reason. You have the power to do this as a woman, which is why we see the plethora of ahadith where the Imams say, Man sabarat ala su'i khuluqi zawjiha kana laha mithlu ajri Asiya bint Muzah. Or vice versa. من صبر على سوء خلق زوجته أو امرأته. Allah will give him the reward of Prophet Ayub. In other words, the number one thing you should have to ensure the survival of your marriage is patience. It's not the 5 languages of love. It's not how many times you are romantic with each other. All those things are fine. In fact, they're great. We have a hadith about them. And tubdi lahu al-ishq. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, which is a very rare use of the word ishq, by the way, in our religious traditions and scriptures. So show love, be romantic. All these things are great. But the number one feature that you need is patience. Once again, think of it as an investment. Think of it as a business venture. Think of it as something that must survive at any cost. It must succeed. Don't think about divorce the first time a problem comes up, because you're throwing the baby with the bathwater. You're giving up. Don't give up. Divorce is a last resort. أبغض الحلال إلى الله. It's the most detested permissible act. It's when all else fails. There's no other solution. You've tried everything. You've exhausted every effort. And now you have no other option. The guy is a drunkard, for instance. How do you live with a person like that? But prior to even contemplating divorce and separation, think about, how do I fix this? Part of it is patience. Part of it is being able to manage the conflict. Part of it is simply doing the things you're supposed to do as a spouse. I'm not speaking specifically to the men or the women, both of you. Do what you must do for the sake of Allah. I've heard people say, but if I'm kind to him, he takes advantage of me. Don't worry about that. Be kind to him for the sake of Allah. You've heard the name Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. I mentioned him, I think, a couple of times in this series. Great companion of Imam al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam. And we have a hadith that says, Kana Yunus. In his time, Yunus was like Salman in his time. He's the one who came to Imam al-Rida upset about the things people were saying about him. A lot of people didn't approve of him. And that's how it is when you're in a leadership position and you want to be good and moral and virtuous. Conflicts penetrate people's minds and they push them in the wrong directions. And so people are upset with you. So the Imam said to him, Ya Yunus, don't worry. Don't be upset. Don't pay too much attention to what other people tell you. As long as your Imam is pleased with you, it doesn't matter what other people think of you. That Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. They say that Yunus used to walk around and say this publicly. He would declare, whoever has the love of Ali ibn Abi Talib in his heart, فَهُوَ فِي حِلٍّ مِّنِّي. I don't care what you've done to me, as long as you harbor the love of Ali, you are relieved of any duty towards me. In other words, I've forgiven you. When a husband or wife deals with their spouse in the spirit of the love of Ali ibn Abi Talib, what happens to this marriage? He mistreats me, I'll treat him well for the love of Ali, for the sake of the Imam of the time. Why? Because I'm doing this for Allah, not for him. And I know that I'll be rewarded by Allah, as we cited in the hadiths. And I have a more important job, which is to raise good children. Imagine a couple who have deep marital problems. Deep. It's gotten to the point where, they're in the courts. The lawyers are talking to each other now. Suddenly, something happens to their child. God forbid, he's diagnosed with cancer or some terminal illness. What happens? They set all their problems aside. At the very least, one of them does. They set their problems aside. They're like, you know what? Whatever issues we have to deal with can now take a back seat, because right now our priority is our boy and our girl. Is that not the case? If you care about the well-being of your child, that's how you will act. Imagine when a husband or wife says, you know what? Our priority is our children. Our priority is to raise children who will support the Imam of the time, who will become the Yunus of Abdul Rahman to the Imam of their time. Suddenly, their problems become trivial. Their conflicts and their issues and their feuds take a back seat. So do it with the intention of pleasing Allah, number one. Second, to ensure that your priorities, who are your children, are looked after. Your duties to them are fulfilled. When you keep all of that in mind, suddenly your life takes a different direction. Then it comes to raising the kids. As I said, keep in mind the word of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Badiru, take the initiative. Take precautionary measures. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. Imagine the husband walks into the house and places a bag on the kitchen counter. Then he goes about his work, and the next day there's a foul stench inside the kitchen, which then overtakes the whole house. So they look for it and they find that this bag had meat, and now the meat has gone bad. It's spoiled. So the husband says to his wife, what happened? I brought this meat. Why didn't you put it in the fridge? And she's like, I don't know. I just put it over there just like all the other beans and whatever. And he's like, no, you can't do that. Badiru. Which means that as soon as the meat is brought into the kitchen, you take it and put it in the freezer, or you clean it or whatever you want to do. Then you put it in the freezer. When it comes to your children, there has to be this initiative where things are done way in advance, as I said earlier. Now, one of the most critical roadmaps to bringing good children into this world is the one that has been elucidated by the Holy Prophet, as well as many other traditions of subsequent Imams, the successors of Rasulullah, which is the 777 rule. You've probably heard this before. I wish to elaborate on it just a little bit in the remainder of my time. The Prophet says, and we have different variations of the hadith, but the gist of it is the same. He says you should divide your child's life into 3 phases. The first one is the first 7 years of his life. So the Prophet says, "Utrukhu sab'an." Leave him for 7 years. The second phase, after he turns 8, "Addibhu sab'an." Discipline him or her for the next 7 years. Then the third phase is when he or she turns 15. The Prophet says, "Wasahibhu sab'an." Let's open this up just a little bit. "Utrukhu sab'an" means that the way you discipline your child has to be subliminal. You have to use indirect methods to educate your child. Translation: be a good role model for them. Be the kind of person that you want them to turn out to be. Which means that when it comes to prayer, fasting, doing good deeds, being truthful, not lying, all these moral characteristics that you want your child to possess when they grow up, make sure those are reflected on you. Why? Because a child's brain and personality is only developing in that phase. And instead of directly teaching them, instructing them, those verbal instructions aren't effective. Instead, they're scanning your every move. They're trying to figure out how you are, and they will mirror you. They will shadow you. In other words, tell them by your actions as opposed to your words. Now, some people might say, well, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not the ideal person that I want my children to be like. That's fine. Pretend like you are. You know how when people work in the hospitality industry, I don't know if you've noticed, but you have people who, let's say for instance, they're an air hostess for an airline. Those who work in economy class, they have a different demeanor to the ones who work in business or first class. Do they pick different people with different personalities to be placed in these positions? No. But they train the ones who work in business or first class to be more respectful, more courteous. Even if that person isn't like this in real life. But that's how they're trained. Just like an actor simply plays the part. They could be a completely different person, but they're able to put on a persona and display it for other people. Is this a bad thing? Is this hypocritical? The answer is no. We have a hadith that say, مَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ حَلِيمًا فَلْيَتَحَلَّمْ. If you're not naturally a patient person, someone who's forbearant, someone who doesn't react to, terrible, bad, disrespectful circumstances, if you're not that kind of person, if you are reactionary, if you get upset really easily, the Imam says, at least act as though you are a patient person. Because the more you practice this, the more likely it is that you will adopt this personality trait. So, when it comes to my children, who mirror and shadow their parents in their every move, anyone who has a young child knows this. They will shadow you, and the slightest variations they'll be able to detect. They're incredibly smart when it comes to this. So much so that the hadith says that when you make your child a promise, make sure you keep it. Why? The Imam says, فَإِنَّهُمْ لَا يَرَوْنَكُمْ إِلَّا أَنَّكُمْ تَرْزُقُونَهُم. Because your children see you as godlike. You're a giant in their eyes. So if you make a promise, even if it's something trivial, I'll buy you an ice cream, but then you don't, this will shatter their entire worldview. They will no longer trust you. They won't in fact trust anybody else. And so act in a manner that provides them with a good role model for the first 7 years. Then comes the second phase, where the Imam and the Prophet, he says, أَدِّبْهُ سَبْعًا, which means now that you're 8 years old, things are getting serious. If you must nudge them in the right direction, if you have to pressure them to be good, to pray, to fast, to do good things, and so on and so forth, then you must. But then, of course, we see parents who are like, our household is a place where we don't use the word no. I don't want to tell my girl to wear hijab because I want her to grow into it. Right? I don't want to get my son to pray. I don't want to force him because, what's the point, right? You want him to pray on his own, and so I'll give him some space. But when it comes to the most trivial things like brushing their teeth, you start out by brushing their teeth yourself. Then at the age of 2 and 3, you make sure you're standing there breathing down their neck so that they brush their teeth. When it comes to going to school, when it comes to doing their homework, when it comes to, making their bed, when it comes to cleaning the house, when it comes to taking their share of the household chores, all of a sudden, it's not about growing into it. They have to do it. They have no choice. As parents, you know how to do this. You are able to put and exert enough pressure to point them in the right direction and to develop good habits for them. But when it comes to religion, all of a sudden, no, I want them to be convinced. Well, who's doing the convincing? You're certainly not. You certainly don't have the skill sets to do that. You don't have the knowledge to do that. So who's doing it? أَدِّبْهُ سَبْعًا. Make sure that they understand now, not just by your actions and you as a role model, but also with clear instructions, follow-ups. Be there, ensure that they're doing the right thing. So this is the second phase. You step it up and you become more deliberate in your actions. Then the third stage, وَصَاحِبْهُ سَبْعًا. And I'll conclude with this. The Prophet says, accompany them. When they turn 15 or 16, now they're adolescents, they're teenagers, they're at a very delicate stage in their development. The Prophet says, be a friend to them. Befriend them. There should be no secrets between you anymore. I don't have my child's passcode to his or her mobile phone. Well, why should there be any passcodes in this household? And even if there are passcodes, because they don't want other people to pry on the contents of their phone, as a parent, I should have a relationship with my child where they don't keep this from me. I'm not saying you should spy on them, but there shouldn't be any secrets between us. Because we've spent the last 15 years fostering a loving, caring, but also deliberate relationship so that now we don't keep secrets from each other. But that's how we treat our children. We give them their own private rooms. We give them their computers. We give them their tablets. We give them their phones. We give them all the privacy they want. And they're like, why should you know what's on my phone? So the Prophet says, befriend them. Get close to them. Be as close to them as any member of their circle of friends. Sahibhu also means to accompany them. Take them out with you. You're going out with your friends, take your son. Take your daughter as a mother. Because think about it, having my child with me wherever I go also means that I'll watch out what I do and what I say. Right? Parents in the company of their friends, they might feel comfortable and say things that they wouldn't otherwise say. But if your child was there, I would have to be at my best behavior. Right? But again, this fosters an incredible relationship between parents and their children. Look at Rasulullah and how beautifully he says that one of the things a parent, or three of the things that a father should teach their sons is what? As-sibaha, wal-rimaya, wa-rukub al-khayl. You've heard this hadith, I'm sure. But think about the choice of activities that Rasulullah has presented to us. Sibaha, swimming. Because when you're teaching someone to swim, you'd have to build trust, right? Because they think they might drown. And so a great deal of trust has to be created before this child is able to rely on me as a parent so that they would learn how to swim. As-sibaha. Then al-rimaya, which is about going out into the great outdoors, engaging in these activities in the wild, right? You teach them archery, and it's a beneficial thing, it's a beautiful activity, but also fosters a better relationship between father and son because you're spending a lot of time camping out and so forth. How beautiful, my brothers and sisters, are the instructions and teachings of our faith. Bring me another religion that goes into this level of detail and provides these beautiful instructions. So, al-rimaya wa rukub al-khayl. Horseback riding, as the Americans call it, or horse riding, more accurately. Horse riding is about how to deal with animals. Therefore, it requires patience. It requires the person to deal with someone who doesn't understand their language, they're not on the same wavelength, it's difficult to reason with an animal, and yet you have to find a way to compromise and to be able to subdue the animal so that you can ride on its back. علموا أولادكم السباحة والرماية وركوب الخيل. And thus you're able to produce a household that bonds and has the right set of circumstances and features that allows it to flourish. So once again, to wrap up, begin with the relationship you have with your spouse. Begin with the choice of spouse. Then the relationship I'll mention this beautiful hadith as well. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam says, "Ma min shafi'in عند الله للمرأة خير من زوجها." He says, you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you? You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a woman to overlook your sins? There is no shafi', no intercessor for you in the eyes of Allah than your husband being pleased. Look after him. Again, as a woman, you have the power to do that. You have the power to treat him well, to respect him, to honor him, to give him the position that Allah has given him within the household, so that he would then reciprocate and look after you. And so that's number 2. Number 3, to follow these guidelines and instructions. There are many books written on the subject of child rearing and child discipline in Arabic. One of the best books, it's a classic, is the book by Sheikh Muhammad Taqi Falsafi called Al-Tifl Bayn al-Wirathati wa-Tarbiyah, translated by Sayyid Fadl al-Milani, may Allah bless him. Great resource. I don't know if it's been translated into English, but there are other resources available, many other books that mention the hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt. My point is this: I'm not here to teach you how to raise good kids. I'm here to make you, number 1, aware of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. And number 2, the fact that you have to be deliberate, you have to be afraid, you have to be intentional and ensure that you have the knowledge to do the right thing. Once you've done all that, you're then able to create a family that produces wonders. Tonight is a night we recall Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan. Imam al-Hasan had 3 children from the same wife, Ramla. There were others as well, but these 3 were from the same mother. Al-Qasim was the eldest, was only 13 years old. Then he had Abdullah, who was about 11 or 12. And finally, Muhammad. Some have said that all 3 of them were martyred in Karbala. The tragedy as Abdullah is a heart-rending one, and we'll mention it on the eve of Ashura. But Al-Qasim was truly special. And what's incredible is that when Imam al-Hasan was about to leave this world, one of the things he said to his brother Aba Abdullah al-Hussein is, "My brother, I want you to be a father for my children. Kun lahum aban." Now, Imam al-Hasan doesn't need to remind his brother to look after his orphans. Maybe what Imam al-Hasan meant was intended for the day of Ashura, which is that I want you to treat my children the same way you treat your own. If you give your children permission to fight and see them sacrificed, I want my children to also be sacrificed. On the eve of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein is surrounded by his companions. He tells them about what is going to happen tomorrow. He says to them that you're going to die. You will be slain one after the other. Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan is standing there, not a word out of him, out of respect for his uncle Aba Abdullah. He doesn't say anything until Imam al-Hussein tells them that you're all going to be killed. Until finally he says, "My infant will also be killed." This is the moment when Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan comes forward. He says to him, "Ya Am, Ya Aba Abdullah, does that mean they will ambush the tents as well? How could they kill a 6-month-old infant?" Imam al-Hussein says to him, "What do you want to know?" He says, "What about me? You've given good news. You've shared all of this glad tidings with your companions. What about me? What do I get? Do I also get a badge of honor from you? Will I be among those who are killed? Imam al-Hussein now asks him a question, perhaps to prepare him, perhaps to teach us all a lesson, that the children of Rasulullah were truly superior to the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when Ibrahim said to his son, Inni ara fil manami anni adhbahuk, I am instructed to kill you, to slaughter you. How does he respond to his father? He says to him, Ya abati fa'al ma tu'mar, satajiduni insha'Allah, satajiduni min as-sabirin. You will find me as someone who is patient. It's okay. I'll be patient. I'll do my best. And yet when Imam al-Hussein said to Qasim, how do you find death? His response was, Fika ahla min al-asal. In the way of defending you in your way, oh uncle, it is sweeter than honey, ya Aba Abdullah. So the Imam told him that you will also join my companions and my family members. Ajarakallah ya baqiyat Allah. It was the moment when Imam al-Hussein looked to the left and the right and found no more supporters. He called out, Ala hal min nasirin yansuruna liwajhillah. هل من ذاب يذب عن حرم رسول الله? Is there no one to help us for the sake of Allah? Is there no one to defend the women of Rasulullah? That is when this young boy emerged from the tent. Labbayka ya Amma. He came to his uncle. He said to him, may I have your blessing and permission to go? Unlike others to whom the Imam gave permission, when Ali al-Akbar came, the Imam immediately gave him permission to go. But when Qasim came, the Imam said, absolutely not. You are the trust of my brother Hassan. You are his orphan. The Imam refused to let him go. The reporter says, he says, وَإِذَا بِالْغُلَامِ يُقَبِّلُ يَدَيْهِ. He began kissing his uncle's hands, begging him to go. When the Imam refused still, he then fell to the ground and began kissing his uncle's feet. He begged Aba Abdullah. The reporter said that then I saw the Imam embrace the young boy. He put his chest against his. وَبَكَ يَا سَاعَ حَتَّى غُشِيَ عَلَيْهِمَا. They cried so much that they fell unconscious. I have not come across any other moment in Karbala when Abu Abdullah fell unconscious. After a while, they regained consciousness. Imam al-Hussein gave him the permission he sought, but the young boy is too small to wear a helmet. He's too young to put on an armor. Abu Abdullah took his turban off. He cut it in half. He wrapped one half over the young boy's head, making a turban for him. He took the other half and wrapped it, tied it around his waist. The reporter says, Hamid ibn Muslim, he says the young boy began sprinting into the battlefield. وَهُوَ يَبْكِي. He was crying. He rushed towards the battlefield. Some of the enemy forces started asking. They saw this young boy, وَوَجْهُهُ كَفِلْقَةِ قَمَارٍ. His face resembled a fragment of the moon. Some said, who is this young boy? Didn't we kill all of Hussein's children? His response was this epic. He said, إن تنكروني فأنا نجل الحسن. If you don't recognize me, I am the son of Hassan. صبط النبي المصطفى والمؤتمن. The grandson of Rasulullah, the trustworthy one. I carry the blood of the messenger of Allah in my veins. هذا حسين كالأسير المرتهن. Don't you see Hussein like a captured prisoner, surrounded by people who have no mercy in their heart? May Allah deprive them of rain and mercy. This is who I am. He fought courageously at the tender age of 13 years old, Ya Muslimin. A wicked man looking at him said, علي آثام العرب إن لم أثكل عمه به. May the sins and the crimes of the Arabs rest on my back if I don't make his uncle grieve over him. Hamid ibn Muslim looked at this man. He said to him, isn't it enough that he is surrounded by all of those animals? Wallah, if he came to strike me, I wouldn't strike him back. He said, Wallahi la af'alan. I will make Hussein grieve over his nephew. He says that the young boy's sandal snapped. He bent down to fix it. That is when Munqidh ibn Murrah came from the back. He struck Al-Qasim over his head. The young boy, being so young, he instinctively cried out, Aghithni ya Amma, my uncle, save me. Aba Abdullah went to him like an eagle coming to take its prey. By the time he arrived and the fight occurred, when the dust settled, وَإِذَا بِالْغُلَامِ يَفْحَصُ بِرِجْلِهِ. His feet were shaking in the sand. Imam al-Hussein looked at him. He said, Azza wallah, ala ammika an tad'uh fala yujibuk. It is painful for your uncle that you call him, but he doesn't answer you. Or that he answers, but cannot help you. Hada wallah yawmun. هذا والله يوم كثر واتره وقل ناصره. I have no one to help me. Now when Ali al-Akbar was killed, Imam al-Hussein called Bani Hashim to come and help him carry Ali back to the tent. When Abbas fell, Imam al-Hussein left Abbas over there because Abbas didn't want to be taken back. But when Qasim fell, the narrator says that I saw Abu Abdullah carrying the young boy, his chest pressed against his chest. The Imam's back was bent and the feet of the boy were dragging on the ground. أيوا ويلاه ومصيبته يا أبا عبد الله. May I and everyone be ransomed for your chest and your broken heart. That same chest which on the day of Ashura, Umar ibn Sa'd said, I am looking for 10 horses. Hussein! Sayyid it 3 times, Hussein!